And thank you all for joining us tonight for I think our 10th literary cocktail hour since lockdown was introduced over a year ago now. And I really do thank you for your support of these evenings. I'm delighted that these events have been so popular, and to our members and our friends. And they certainly will continue after lockdown as we go back into having events at the new Stationers Hall. And hopefully they'll become a permanent fixture in our Livery Committee programme. So far, with one exception, we've been entertained by members of the Stationers Company. But tonight, for the second time, we go outside the company and our membership. And actually tonight we have a bog-off. We have two individuals to be interviewed by Peter, and I'm delighted that we've got two people that are dedicated to the printed word, in Simon Esterson and John Waters. They're co-owners of the leading international magazine, and both are absolutely passionate about the printed word and the future of print. So without further ado, charge your glasses, sit back, and enjoy Peter interviewing Simon and John. Over to you, Peter.
Thank you, Mike. Yes, we're looking at print through the eyes of two people very involved with design and print design, graphic design and visual culture, as represented by a rather distinguished magazine called I. They run it from a studio not very far from me here in North London. Its scope is gloriously global and wonderfully eclectic. I hope we'll get a feel for that as we go on. It's quite a big and quite an expensive magazine, now in its 31st year, and it comes out quarterly or just about. They're just putting to bed issue 101. I hope we'll see a bit of that in a minute. We'll get to the magazine itself a bit later on, but first of all, let's hear from the people behind it. First up, Simon Esterson. He's been designing magazines for many years, and I recently had a big chuck out and, well, failed to chuck out a lot of stuff actually, over 40 years of magazine accumulation for work. And the ones I couldn't chuck out, I saw when I looked at them hard, had the words art director Simon Esterson on them. So he's the art editor of I, and he has been for 16 years, and he also runs a design studio, and he's speaking to us from there now. Simon, how did you get into graphic design in the first place?
I'm a failed journalist, or failed would-be journalist. So when I was at school, I wanted to write and do interviews and that kind of thing. And I was very lucky. I went to the kind of school that did have a school magazine, not an incredibly ambitious one, but we had a school magazine. And at one point I found myself as editor of the school magazine because nobody else wanted to do it. And I realized that my best friend at school was a much better writer than I was. So we became a little team. He did the writing, and I became fascinated by how you take the raw materials, how you take the writing and the photography and the graphics, and how you make it into a magazine. So my entry into graphic design is really through editorial design. I would say I was an editorial designer. I don't really, I hesitate to say I don't really do corporate identity. If somebody's got a nice corporate identity project, I'm really happy to do it. But my real enthusiasm is about content and how you work with content, and it's been like that since I did the school magazine. And it's also, when I did the school magazine, I was called in by the bursar. I don't think the bursar had ever talked to a pupil at my school before, but the bursar simply said, "I've got this bill from the printer and I don't understand why it's twice the cost of the last school magazine." So, I got onto budgeting quite early.
Which you're now pretty involved in, of course. Did you train formally?
No, because I spent so much time doing the school magazine, I failed 2 of my 3 A-levels, and I didn't go to Warwick to study politics, philosophy and economics, which was probably a good thing. And I got a job. So I knew a little bit, because of doing the school magazine, I knew a little bit about printing. And I got a job in the first kind of instant print shop in London. There was an entrepreneur who'd seen instant print shops in America, and he set one up in Conduit Street in London, and he was determined not to employ any union labour. So it was a very strange mixture of young and old misfits allowed to roam the floors of, well, we had two shops, one in Conduit Street and one in Shepherd's Market in Mayfair.
And you could, this was all about putting things together without hot metal and things like that.
Yeah, this was the days of Letraset and IBM composing machines and, you know, non-union artwork, if anybody ever remembers what artwork is. And yeah, I think I got the job.
What a wonderful thing Letraset was to learn from, wasn't it?
Well, that, I got the job because I could Letraset, and I could Letraset because I'd done the school. We did all the headlines in the school magazine on Letraset. So yeah, I was cheap and I could Letraset, and people would come in and you'd consult about doing their letterhead, and you'd try and lead them towards an interesting, you know, typographically decent typeface in the Letraset catalogue, but somehow they'd always choose the really, really florid ones. And of course, you know, it was a service industry, so there was me Letrasetting very florid typefaces.
So this was fantastic learning up the coalface stuff, no theory at all. You were right in the middle of it in a new technology world.
Yeah, and as I say, sort of quite deliberately non-unionized world as well. So we had, you know, printers, you know, old lag printers in the basement running small printing machines, and we had you know, young designers hired straight from, maybe hired's unfair, I think maybe they were just kidnapped from the London College of Printing, and there was me, and I'd sort of, well, I'd read a few books, and I knew a bit about it, and it was great fun. I mean, believe me, it wasn't just about Letrasetting, it was also about having far too much to drink on a Friday night, which I hadn't had enough experience of. And then I saw and got a job at the Architectural Press, which was at that point a privately owned publishing company. And we had the Architects Journal, which was the weekly magazine for architects, and that made all the money. And we had the Architectural Review, which was the world famous monthly magazine for international architects, and that spent all the money. And that was how the business worked. And I was in the engine room of the Architects Journal.
And we'll jump on to Esterson Associates now.
Shall I show you some things? I've got a little screen.
Okay, yeah, do, yeah.
Let me just try and do this properly. I'm not always great at screen sharing. Okay, can people see that? So while I was at the Architectural Press, one of the journalists, Dan Sujic, we started talking about doing a new kind of architecture magazine, architecture and design magazine, and we called it Blueprint. And initially we all worked for free, and we would get together for a weekend a month, and using that Letrasetting, sticking it down technology, we would make a magazine. So this is from 1985. We'd probably been going a couple of years at that point, or it's number 22, so yeah, a couple of years. And you know, Diane knew writers and I knew photographers, so this is we sent Phil Sayer, who's one of my most regular collaborators. We sent Phil Sayer to Paris to photograph Philippe Starck, the then sort of incredibly famous, well, it says here, the world's hottest designer. Who could argue with that cover line? Okay, so, and it's quite large format. It's kind of A3 size. And I guess what was interesting about Blueprint was that we would write about furniture in a way that architecture magazines didn't, because, you know, they wrote about buildings, but we would do both. So this is Norman Foster's Hong Kong and Shanghai Bank, which was, you know, the iconic modernist building of the time. And I think probably Diane, who had a day job as the architecture correspondent of the Sunday Times, had probably been to Hong Kong and knew Norman very well. So actually it wasn't, access wasn't particularly difficult.
Now this is one I like very much indeed.
So this is we've now come forward.
This is what you do these days.
This is what we do these days, and so this is an Esterson Associates project, and I did this with Holly Catford, who's the designer. We work together on every project, and History Today is Holly's particular responsibility. It was a pretty nice monthly history magazine, but the publisher came to us, and what we wanted to try and do was almost make it into a monthly book. So this, in contrast to Blueprint, this is actually quite small. It's almost like a B format paperback. And the sort of trick with that was that if you made 64 pages of conventional magazine, if you made the page size smaller, you could make 128 pages in the book size. I mean, you simply fold the sheet more. So actually, what one publisher I used to work with would call the thud factor, that actually had weight to it when you slapped it on the desk. It felt a much more substantial. There's Peter is a loyal reader. It feels more substantial. So the idea was to make it like a book, but not make it look like a book. So these are some recent covers. Basically, we use a special color on every cover. This is gold. This is fluorescent green. I mean, we're deliberately, and the gold is that's quite a royal thing, but here we're deliberately using sort of contemporary colors with the historical themes. And these are some of the inside spreads. And we're not making a polite book, but we are making something that this is the opening of a feature, and then this is the opening of another feature about Sparta. But then once you get past the opening spread, it really is quite bookish in its presentation. So you get this real sort of almost cinema title like opening, but then you go to something that is quite restrained and readable and quite clear about the historical images and the maps that you're seeing.
But what you've done is you've turned a venerable publication, it goes back to just after the war, I think, and every school used to have a copy and that kind of thing, into something really rather exciting, demands to be read.
I'm glad you think so. I mean, like everything we're showing and I'm talking about this evening, I have a thing about the content, and what I like is the way one can work with content, and the attraction of History Today is that you've got good writing, but also we have an amazing picture editor and the material, the visual material that comes to us that we can then work with. So some things you can crop, some things you can't crop, but actually a double page spread in the 64-page magazine, a double page picture of the Armada or something, that you're giving away an awful lot of the magazine to one thing. But if you've doubled the number of pages, actually suddenly double page spreads, in a way, they don't consume as much, but they are equally impressive. They're simply on a smaller format. So it's kind of questions like that. And I wouldn't pretend that the publishers were already going down this route. I think we were just involved in really trying to make it actually happen.
But it's this emphasis on content, the stuff that got you interested in doing a magazine at school, still the same sort of feel when you approach a project.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. And I hate it when somebody says, "Oh, we've edited the pictures and here's the copy." I actually want the pictures to be unedited. I want to see. That's what I enjoy doing. I enjoy reading the copy or discussing what we might write or what we might photograph. I mean, there's History Today, there's an editorial team and they write and research that material. We make it. some of the other things we do, we begin with conversations begin with nothing. There is just the idea that we are going to make a publication, what size it might be, what framework it's in. That's to be fleshed out, really.
Do clients come to Esterson Associates with the right questions? Do they want the right thing from you, or do they just want garnish, decoration?
Well, some people definitely see graphic design as decoration, and there is an element of what we call the visual vocabulary for a project. What should this thing look like, and that's what we sort of do. I think it's different. Every client's different. I think that the most important thing is, in my sort of experience, is you only do good work with a good client. And the best clients are demanding, but they're also open to advice and ideas. You sort of pretentious to talk about designers being like solicitors or something, but you are a kind of advisor. And I've been around the block with printing systems and printing technology and what works and what doesn't work and what we might do with something. And so that advice is I think is useful to clients.
Well, sometimes you're your own client, aren't you?
Yeah, so this is Post, which is a project we did. I did with the designer Melanie Muse and a group of photographers and a writer during lockdown in Hackney. Peter's very kindly showed it there. It's big format, and it begins from the fact that I always wanted to do a local newspaper, but kind of a local newspaper where the normal practices were reversed. So lots of good photography, not much writing. And Melanie and I were sitting on a socially distanced park bench having a coffee during the beginning of the first lockdown, and we sort of realized this was a moment to do something local, and that between us we knew photographers and writers and we could do interviews, and so we just decided to do this thing. We didn't have any money, any finance for it. We called it Post because I've always quite liked those newspaper, the not necessarily the Racing Post, but the kind of the Tottenham Post or the Stratford Post, and also Post was also about what was going to happen after what we thought at that point was one lockdown. Really, I mean, this is March, April last year, and that gives it part of its character, which is that, the first lockdown was about the weather, and it was about people being out in the park, or as here, Michelle on his bicycle. Michelle's an editor at Phaidon, or Sally Goebel swimming every morning, and these were the kind of stories we wanted to do as well. This is the rebellious non-binary basketball team. This is Hackney, up at Hackney Marshes. And this is, we did a piece, we just went round with the photographer Suki Danda on a Sunday afternoon and photographed people walking their dogs. So it was a moment, and we really just, we just had interviews with people, which we recorded. We were very lucky that Pure Print, who are one of the printers we work with most, very kindly said they would produce it for basically material costs, and then we gave it away. We stood in Kingston Road outside Sainsbury's and Marks and Spencer's in Kingston Road, and gave it away to people, and that was interesting as well, because you don't often have totally direct contact with readers, and actually, of course, during a lockdown, they don't want you to have totally direct contact. So but it was good fun. Yeah, as you say, Peter, we were completely our own client, and our own distribution service. And probably the only thing that really looks like a local newspaper is the rules between the columns. I mean, I love column rules, and they're there, you know, to try and lock up the geometry of the page.
Now, this is a stupid question coming after that. Oh, here's Pulp, yes, because I'm going to ask.
Yeah, sure.
With all these question marks about the new digital world, or the fairly new digital world, a lot of print seems to be in terrible trouble at the moment, but you still have your faith in print, do you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the problems about the boom in magazines was that, to be completely honest, and just between the people on this call, there were a lot of terrible magazines out there produced by, rather cynically, by people who were using them as direct advertising vehicles or various things. So, you know, in a way, digital has given printed objects real competition. I think it's changing the kind of printed things that work. Print is much more niche than it used to be, and you know, so weekly magazines, monthly magazines, that's difficult. But there's a huge market in bi-monthlies and quarterlies, like I is supposed to be, and biannuals and annuals, and they're richly produced. You know, they've got good paper and good reproduction. Some of them use techniques, fifth colors and gatefolds and short pages and different types of stock that had been largely edited out of kind of commodity magazines, which were, you know, straightforward CMYK all the way through. So I think you know that it's smaller, but I think there's some really interesting projects. I think that borderline between what's a book and what's a magazine is now really porous. You know, there are paperback books that are cheaper than magazines, than, you know, special niche magazines. I think you find that they're primarily heavily illustrated, because I don't think heavy picture use online is still relatively unsophisticated. I mean, there are so many online things that are very sophisticated, but actually moving between pictures and the pace of pictures and the scale of pictures is still a slight rarity online. And the other thing is that, and it's John and I have just done an issue of Pulp, which we'll talk about in a second. Our latest issue is about digital printing, and I think that world of short run, and sometimes the run is one copy, you know, short run, online ordered or digital printing. So, you know, we all know now that you can get all the pictures on your iPhone made into a book that you can send to your granny and all that kind of thing. I mean, this is amazing publishing technology that hasn't been, people haven't had this before. And it's not simply amateurs. You know, we can make a book of 20 copies and it can be perfectly printed digitally, and it can be hand bound, and it can have gilt edges, and it can have foiling on the front, and it's better than, because of the value we can put on that book, it's better than a book published by a mainstream publisher, you know, not to name anybody, Thames and Hudson, that kind of thing.
Tell us about Pulp.
Okay, so Pulp is a magazine that John and I, that the I team, sorry, it's complicated, EYE, so that John and I and the I team make for the Italian paper manufacturer Fedrigoni. And we make it 3 times a year, and we make it in multiple languages. So there are 3 different editions, each with 2 languages in them. And it's really about trying to show, its subtitle is A Quarterly Journal of People and Paper, and it's about stories around people and paper, and that's everything from Fedrigoni, who actually make paper, to designers and other people who use it and specify it. And we're allowed Fedrigoni is a good client, and we're a very good client, and we're allowed relative freedom about the content. So, you know, John manages the content ideas, and we put those through Fedrigoni, but essentially we then run them, and Fedrigoni, being a good Italian company, insists that it's printed in Italy. So 3 times a year I pop over to Italy and sit at the back of a press in Rome or Verona or Turin or something. In fact, I was in Turin printing an issue of Pulp on the day before Italy announced its COVID lockdown. So I flew out on the Saturday night, and on the Sunday morning I woke up to discover that the north of Italy was in lockdown.
And this is a celebration of paper, of what paper can do, and yes, the possibilities of paper.
Absolutely. And you know, there are lots of paper companies that are simply marketing companies, that they don't make the paper, they get other people to make the paper. Fedrigoni is a genuine paper maker with mills, which John and I have both been to, mills in and around Verona and other mills in Brazil and places. So it's an international paper company with a heritage, an amazing heritage of coloured papers and special papers and packaging papers. John's holding up some more copies, I think.
Let's go to John now.
Yeah, let's talk to John.
John, you started in music, didn't you? You weren't in print or design or anything at all.
Well, listening to Simon reminded me that the very first magazine I worked on was a school magazine. And it was called Eyebrow. And I was one of the writers. They sort of, I think they realized all the clever writers were in the sixth form and about to, you know, be chucked out or leave of their own accord. So they recruited some younger people to start writing stuff. And I had a lot of fun. That was really the first time I even thought about writing as something I could do, other than writing school essays. And then that kind of collapsed for some reason, and we did a sort of breakaway rebellious magazine called Afghan Hound. And I was actually given the title of art director for that, but that was merely because I was the person who could cut up the letter set and stuff like that. So my roots are very, very dim roots are in a similar way, but I went to university to study maths and physics, started writing a lot of jazz compositions and formed a band, and spent early part of my career as a band leader, performer, and then as a record producer, until I realized that, perhaps erroneously, that becoming an editor and writer was provided a steadier income. Not entirely sure that was a good decision, but about the late 80s, I started working as an editor and what's rather euphemistically known as a production consultant, because everybody was turning over to desktop publishing. And because I was very familiar with computers from working in the music business, I was the kind of one-eyed man in the land of the blind. And I was a few pages ahead in the Quark manual from everyone else I worked with. So I started to work on lots of magazines and newspapers in the 90s, and very quickly realized that some of the best magazines, or the magazines I most enjoyed working on, were things like the Architectural Review. This was after Simon's time at what used to be the Architectural Press, but you know, in a weird way, I think the Architectural Press DNA is kind of in I, and it was through the Architectural Review that I got to meet the people who were working on I, and at the end of the 90s, I first became managing editor, and then I became its editor in '99.
Never understand managing editor and editor, but anyway, it's a promotion when it becomes editor, isn't it?
Doesn't the managing editor sign the invoices? Isn't that how it works?
Well, I do both those things now.
and then Simon came in as art director, and
Yes.
then you bought the magazine. Now that's a great big step, isn't it? The magazine had been in various hands. It used to change hands every 3 years or something.
Well, during my time, it went through 3 different owners, all of whom started with the best of intentions, but found it quite a difficult beast to understand and you know how best
They
to
were
spell.
running it out of as a stable of magazines on the whole.
Yes, it was part of a set of magazines at EMAP, like Media Week and so on, and then it went to Quantum, where it was alongside Seafood International, and then to Haymarket, where it's alongside things like Campaign. And we probably fit into the advertising world as well as we do into the seafood world. So it was felt, but on both sides, it was a good idea for I to become independent. And of course, the person who was always, at the back of my mind when it came to independence, even much earlier in the history of the magazine, was Simon, because I knew that Simon had ambitions to be a publishing mogul and own something like I, and was always there as someone who provided advice about I, even when he wasn't before he was the art director. So it seemed like a step we could take, and the two of us, along with a third partner called Hannah Tyson, who helped us set up the new company, we did a management buyout in 2008.
Just as the financial world was collapsing, so
yeah, fantastic timing.
Difficult to get a lot of attention if you wanted to borrow money.
Yes, John, is it true to say we didn't really know what we were doing?
Well, Hannah knew what she was doing.
That's true. Yes, Hannah kept on saying to us, "You don't know what you're doing."
Yes, it was pretty difficult first year and a half, but
you were buying something you believed in, a very small circulation, but you could concentrate, laser-like concentration on the subjects you wanted to concentrate on.
Yes, and actually, Peter,
it worked, has it?
Well, Peter, I'd say it's not just me and Simon who believe in the magazine, because I think if that were the case, we wouldn't still be here. But the readers seem to believe in the magazine. We had such fantastic...
And the advertisers.
The advertisers believe in the magazine, and the writers and contributors who we feature believe in the magazine. So there's this incredible kind of virtual network, support network, or safety net, I suppose, as well. Of people who want to be in the magazine. The advertisers, we're very grateful for that. The advertisers want to be in the magazine and love to be in print, even for businesses such as the type industry, where that is chiefly digital now. If you want to buy a new typeface, you don't wait for a little package wrapped in paper and string to arrive from the foundry. You can just download it overnight. But our wonderful type foundry clients like advertising. They like the way things look in I, and the fact that Simon lavishes such care and attention over its printing, and we have the best.
Sorry, Simon, can I just check, Simon, you're still sharing your screen, so we can't see John in his wonderful Harlequin shirt.
Oh, okay.
Get rid of Pulp and go to I in a minute, I think.
Yeah, sure. What should we just try go through this?
John first. Can you give us a
picture of I? Because we're talking about I while we're looking at a picture of
yes. Well, I'll just skip through. So these are some of the pages from Pulp, and you can see here, we're working with sort of amazing photography, and we're working with coloured paper. So, that's not a tint; that is real colour. This is actually printed silver, but it's about showing how these kind of techniques work on paper. So here, okay, so this is I, and this is issue 94, which was an experiment. We're talking about digital printing. So this is an experiment in digital printing where there are 8,000 covers of I-94, and everyone is different. And they're numbered on the back as well. And this is using some HP Indigo technology and the brilliance of the designers Muir McNeil, who we work with on it. And you create a pattern, quite a complicated pattern, and then the technology interrogates that pattern in different ways. So this was printed at Pure Print on 4-color Indigo, HP Indigo press, and there genuinely are 8,000 different covers generated electronically, generated digitally by the program from the so-called seed pattern.
And I wanted you to put this in for a Stationer's Innovation Award, but you didn't, because I think it is a very original, very original thing to do.
I can't think why we didn't put it in for Stationers Award.
I
That's very
did-
bad on our
I
part.
did suggest you did.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's my fault. No, I mean, we made a film about it because we had this amazing experience. You know, if you stand up at the back of a printing press or at the back of a binding line, the thing is that everything comes off and it's all the same. Well, actually here, everyone was different. It was a great experience. The only mistake we made was that nobody kept number one. We couldn't ever find edition 001
or 8,000 for that matter.
Shall I show some more?
Show some more.
Yeah.
Show some more.
So this is from our food special issue of I. So John wrote a piece about the then fashionable Byron burger chain, which was sort of making its mark by doing everything differently. No restaurant was the same. No set of graphics was the same.
Anti-branding branding.
Exactly, but they soon bit the dust at some venture capitalist who came along and sort of ruined the idea, really. This is from one of our type issues. This is the geeky nature of I, perhaps. So this is a piece about Rudolph Cox Typeface Kabul, which was developed in the 1930s as a metal typeface and was then reworked in the 21st century as a digital typeface. And so we've got comparative characters, so we can see the different kinds of G's, the different shapes of the E's, the different dots or triangles on top of the I's. And this was particularly motivated because John and I went to the Klingspor foundry in just outside Frankfurt and saw some of the original drawings and some of the original material. We do what we call reputations, which is a kind of profile of designers, question and answer interviews. This was the then team called Atlas of Astrid Stavro and Pablo Martin. Pretty much as soon as we published it, Astrid went to work for Pentagram, but Chiara Medioli, who we know through Fedrigoni, had an amazing interview with the Swiss poster designer Laura Lamb, who was working in Italy in the 1960s. This is a detail from one of Laura Lamb's posters for La Rinascenta in Milan. We have quite experienced writers. This is a piece by Paul Shaw, the type designer and typography critic, writing about script typefaces. And so we work with Paul to borrow the digital fonts and then do various kinds of typesetting with them. So here on the right-hand page, you can see that those two words handwriting, well, that's in the same font, but it's using different characters in these huge multiple glyph font sets that people make now.
And you also do tiny things. You come to, this is I-100, the
Yeah.
last one you put out, but you also do sort of you zoom in on tiny details of things like the Wilkins, the Wilkins jam labels, which are superb in their simplicity, and the Tunnocks marshmallows you
Tunnocks
did.
tea cakes.
Yes.
Well, Tunnocks tea cakes. Both those things were in the food issue, and Tunnocks tea cake was just such an amazing object when you filled the front cover with it, with its silver base and its sort of red printing. We went to see the the jam people, and yes,
fabulous little firm, fabulous firm,
beautiful firm, and we went to see them, and we went to see the managing director, who pointed to his assistant and said, "Oh, well, they designed the labels, you know," and basically they were sitting there at a Mac with a font designing the labels, but I don't think that was their full-time job. And they amazingly had a very popular with WI coach trips, and so they have a really good museum of jam, and we borrowed some of the really old labels out of the museum to photograph, and it's kind of authenticity. You know, sometimes the problem with graphic design is there's too much of it, and actually, you know, something like the Wilkin Jan label stands out because sort of it hasn't been messed around with.
You say authenticity. It's fascinating you use that word, because this is a company that, as so many did, went to the stock market and then didn't like being on the stock market and bought themselves back.
Yeah,
a company of enormous integrity.
Absolutely, and it was fascinating. And they were we spent the day with them, and they were very kind, and we had some jam. We went away with some jam, and there are other companies that spend millions of pounds with graphic design consultancies, with branding experts, trying to kind of pretend basically that they are like that. And it is so refreshing to have the real thing in a way.
It's worth pointing out here that sorry, Peter, that we do special issues of I as well as more general issues, and the jam and the Tunnet's tea cake featured in our food special issue, and the handwriting fonts featured in one of our regular type special issues. We every 4 issues is a type special.
The food issue was fascinating because, you know, we worked collecting the ideas and the various strands for quite a long time, and of course when it actually came to making it, we realized that we had far too many pages than we could possibly produce.
Yeah. Even by throwing out all the reviews, we still had almost more than we could eat.
Yeah, it was a case of too much food on the plate, wasn't it, really? So should we talk about I-100? So this
yes,
is...
Please do. This is I-100.
This is I-100, which we loosely called Talking About Graphic Design. And we didn't want to do a kind of greatest hits of I. We wanted to do something that looked forward. So this was planned before lockdown, but in actual fact, putting it together really happened in March and April and May last year during lockdown. And I think that gave it a certain poignancy, and it gave John a chance to go back and talk to people he'd interviewed. The issue is a mixture of interviews and pieces about particular projects, to go back to people and talk about what they were experiencing. John, that's your cue to say something about what they were experiencing.
Well, it was very interesting because in the case of Lisa Enebase, whose spread I just showed, and Richard Turley, who was featured on the cover, they had some quite interesting things to say. That the onset of the pandemic had made them think maybe slightly differently about what they were doing, and it seemed to add another layer of richness to those interviews. That these weren't really long interviews the way we do our reputations. They tended to be, you know, 2 spreads or maybe 3 spreads, but it meant that we could actually cover quite a wide range of designers in different parts of the world who we felt would be known, well enough known to our readership, but maybe show aspects of their work that still hadn't been seen that much. So there is always a danger that you show this, you know, lots of blog posts and websites show exactly the same things of these designers. So we're always trying to look for something a little bit sort of out of the ordinary or different or surprising about what they do.
So this is Michael Beirut, who's a partner in Pentagram in New York, and in a way is, you know, it's a very eloquent champion of graphic design, but it also shows some of the things we love. This is a half-page sheet on different stock. So we've got Michael's work with a kind of caption commentary on both sides of a little constrained interview.
Bobby C. Martin Jr. Champions Design. They actually changed their name while we were working on this article, right up to the wire.
Yes, I think a last-minute email from Bobby, wasn't there? Oh, by the way, we've just changed our name.
Kate Moraz.
So Kate does a lot of music graphics, and I think, you know, that's another, you know, Michael in a way is the perfect pentagram partner doing corporate work. Kate is doing contemporary music and
well, really big graphics for concerts and things.
Yeah,
I mean, you know, we showed her work with the Spice Girls, and that became rather poignant, having a huge picture of a big pop concert published at a time when nobody could go into a room with, you know, more than one other person and listen to music.
You know, one of the difficulties about making a magazine about graphic design in the same way that it's maybe an art magazine is that, you know, you want to show the stuff as it is, so you try not to distort it, you try not to crop it, but you can take details. And I guess that's what Peter was saying, and occasionally we really zoom into something and show it as a detail. We also shoot some photography, and there's probably more portrait photography in I-100 than there would normally be, but so this picture was shot by Phil in London. Michael Beirut was shot by Maria in New York. And we had, was this really the last interview with Milton Glaser?
I don't know if it was the last, but it was one of the last to be published before he died. And it's an interview by Stephen Heller, writer who's been writing for I since its very beginnings, and a lovely portrait by Maria Spann, who also did the cover portrait of Richard Turley.
And it has to be said that you don't shun digital entirely, because you launched this issue with a wonderful hour and a half from both New York and London about some of the things that were in the magazine, and it was it added quite a lot to the magazine.
Well, it's very nice of you to say, Peter. No, you're quite right that we don't shun the digital world. We're perhaps, you know, here on false pretenses to say that we're great champions of the printed medium. We enjoy showing digital things in a printed medium. There's a spread that Simon showed about 4 or 5 frames back of a big poster festival called Demo, held in Amsterdam train station, which was showing big digital posters, moving image posters in a context, a big public for free context, where ordinary members of the public could go and enjoy really interesting new digital design work shown at poster size, you know, billboard size almost in real life.
And a huge number of them over a weekend or something. It was a big
24-hour period, but it was, I mean, they're going to do it again when it's possible to do such a thing.
And we'd like to do it with them in London. I mean, I think this idea of, you know, public graphics, of moving graphics is really interesting. You know, it's not television graphics, it's not web graphics, it's something else, really.
There's an incredible amount of technical brilliance and also innovation in just in ideas and using variable types, moving type. They're often very short. Sometimes they use sound, sometimes they just work as a piece of imagery. And a lot of the designers involved, and people like Lisa, who we interviewed, who's one of the brains behind this whole venture, was saying that most of the time you're seeing this work on a tiny screen in your hand, just on your smartphone. So to actually see it as it's meant to be seen in a big format is really thrilling, and that it attracted thousands of entries, and I think that they whittled that down to about 500 or 600, I think, which were shown during this festival.
Shall we go on to what you're working on at the moment?
Yes.
I-101. I thought you'd closed it last week, but you haven't yet.
No, we're I'm trying to phrase this politely, but basically we're bad about publishing schedules. Are
you talking to your clients now as well?
No, all the clients' magazines go exactly on time, but of course, I think, you know, there are pluses and minuses about owning your own magazine, and one of the pluses, I guess, is that what's the point of doing it if it's not good? And sometimes good takes a little bit longer, and we are fortunate that advertisers and subscribers are prepared to let us do that. And I'm not proud of it. I know this sounds a bit like sort of Magaholics Anonymous. I'm not proud of running over schedule, but we want to make a good magazine. And so it should have gone to press last week, but Pure Print will tell you that the presses are booked next Friday. So 2 presses all day next Friday. So we better get finished. These are a couple of things. So, I mean, we've both been working on I-101 today. Some of time has been spent.
It's on my other screen right now, actually.
Yeah, it's on my other screen too. Actually.
Yeah.
So these are just 2 things from 101. This is, we have a profile of the graphic designer Jim Sutherland, and Jim is kind of the opposite from us. He's very funny. He's does very witty, intelligent graphic design, and we're looking at 10 projects by Jim. Jim used to run a really big studio. He left it to start in his front room, and of course, because he's very good, he's slowly building up a big studio again.
What's interesting about Jim is that he works for very big clients, and he still works with very small clients, and most of the time it's him and one other designer, and then he'll work with an in-house team or work with people remotely, much the way that Richard Turley described in the interview in the last issue. It's very interesting.
Is you writing this time?
Well, it's more an interview. We, trying to keep the budget under control, like the bursar told me. So that's Jim. We got a feature on Jim. And then by contrast, this is a spread from within a feature about the Barcelona-based designer Mario Eskenazi. And we've got a reputations interview with Mario. Mario has been working away doing fantastic modernist work in Barcelona in Spain for a long time. So this is actually a spread of his book jackets, book designs. On the left, this is a series of books about cinema directors. So he's kind of used that metaphor of the frame, the cinema frame flashing in front of you. We've got a book series of small format books, which are called the Asterisk Series. So he's used a different typeface for each one, but there's always a line of asterisks. And then a couple of examples from a couple of series he does for Paydos, which is a Spanish publisher. Yeah, so these are, what is it, John? 18 pages on Mario? I can't remember.
Yeah, it's a reputations interview, and he's a great. Mario's a great interview subject, and he was interviewed by our very dear and much missed assistant editor Sarah Snaith. It's the last piece of work she did before she sadly died last August. And
so Mario was interviewed in Spanish.
In Argentina.
In Argentina.
Well, Sarah's in Buenos Aires. Of course, Mario comes from Argentina originally, but Mario has his studio based in Barcelona, and he's had a long career, is still very busy, has clients that stay with him for 10, 20, 40 years.
And there's a really strong relationship between Swiss graphic design, Argentinian modern graphic design and Spanish modern graphic design. It's one of those little triangles that sometimes English design commentators forget about the connections that exist in the rest of the world.
I've got to say, Mario Eskenazi is a great subject to fact check with, because I find every time I drop him a line to check on something, I'll get a new anecdote from him, or a new extra line, you know, about bullfighting or something, or you know.
And like Jim, it's a tiny studio working for, you know, the biggest bank in Spain, but actually it's Mario and a couple of assistants.
Yeah.
You say you're still working on this. What's still to be done?
Well, this is pretty finished. It doesn't seem to have any folios on it, John.
No, not this article. Issue 101. You've got to go to the.
Well, what the principal thing that's still got to be done is the cover. We actually.
That's it. This isn't it.
No, this isn't it. This is Holly's. I asked Holly to make a cover, to make a last image for this evening, and
we've had worse covers, haven't we?
Yeah, well, this might by default be the cover. If anybody thinks this is a really bad cover, could you send me an email? I'm glad did you join. We might just scatter a few objects on it or something. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe it is the cover. I don't know.
The cover to Holly for at least stepping into the breach. I thought Simon was going to show a completely blank cover, which we haven't done since 29.
All the best ideas have been done already.
Well, you've come up with this non-cover or cover or whatever it is. We'll have to subscribe, won't we, to see what you actually do when you go to press next Friday or whenever it is. Thank you both ever so much. It's still fun, is it?
Yes.
Yeah, it's fun on good days. It's work on other days, but it's fun. You know.
Well, it's a marvelous magazine. Thank you very much. Let's go back to Mike to sum up. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, guys. That was absolutely fascinating and really entertaining. Actually, when Simon started talking, it took me back to my early days. As for my sins, I actually used to sell a lecture set for a period of time. Amazing. It was like printing money for the people who sold it.
Yeah, not much selling required there, Mike.
No, absolutely not. No, that was just my sort of selling. Actually, I was actually very good at selling the best products in the marketplace. It was quite easy. But thanks, guys. I really enjoyed your passion. So thanks very much, guys. That was really, really good. Talking about book sales, we are out of stock of Richard Overton's book, Burning the Books, but we still have a couple of copies of Nina's History of Vogue. And I'm meeting up with Nina again on the 28th of this month. So apologies for those of you who haven't had your copies yet, but we've got another 30 books being signed there. We've just got a couple unsold there. So if you'd like a personalised copy there, get in touch with me. We've still got just 3 copies left of Stephen's, the Masters, Cathedrals and Pilgrims book. So again, if you want one of those, get in touch with me. Last month, you'll all be aware that we said goodbye to our learned clerk, William Walden. And he has we produced a beautiful book of His Grace's, which is absolutely fantastic. It's £15, and it's an amazing book, and just shows you how history moves so quickly these days, because the Graces are funny, they're inspirational in some instances, but they also cover history, the history of Brexit, changes of government, Olympics, all sorts of things. So again, that's available from the office. As I said at the beginning, we've got a full diary of events coming up. Our next cocktail hour is on the 10th of May with past master Noel Osborne. On 17th of June, we've got Jonathan Drury, whose new book, Around the World in 80 Plants, is actually launched today. So again, we'll have those for sale. And on the 21st of July, we've got Lord Peter Hayne. In addition, on the 21st of April, we've got a Clubline Hidden Treasure tour given by the Reverend Sam Maldred. So again, you can register for that. And then we have just a few places left for the literary cheese tasting event on the 20th of May. So all these events are available to book on www.stationers.org. I'd just like to end by saying, Simon, John, you should actually join us at Stationers Company. You'd fit in really well. with the company. We have a lot of fun. So I'm certainly going to be sending you membership details, and I think you should join us. Especially one of the things you said today, which really ran true, is that you only do your good work with good clients. And that's so true for all of us. Absolutely. So thanks, Simon. Thanks, John. Thanks, Peter, for doing your usual professional job. It's just up to me to say good night, stay safe, and look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you very much.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Good night.